Welcome to
Theories
of the third kind.
Welcome to Theories of the Third Kind. My name is Aaron. The other host joining me today is Danielson.
Hello.
Now, before we start today's episode, we do have a couple of announcements to make.
If you would like to support the show, you could do so by joining our premium subscription service, Supercast. For just $6.66 a month, you can enjoy weekly premium audio episodes and access to our entire back catalog of over 260 plus episodes that are all ad-free.
Or if you're a big baller and you want to get an extra video episode each week, you can sign up to our premium video service for $9.99 a month, and you get access to not only a premium audio episode, but also a premium video episode each month. So you can sign up to that by going to our website, theoriesofthethirdkind.com, clicking on the Supercast button right in the middle of our website. It'll take you over there, and it takes less than 30 seconds to sign up. Super easy to connect to, super easy to do, super easy to use.
Now, we know things are tough out there right now, so if you can't afford a premium membership, but you still want to help us out, you can do so by leaving us a written review on iTunes or Spotify.
That helps us out a lot.
However, don't feel pressured to. If you don't want to, then that's fine. We just want you guys, girls, aliens, reptilians, Bigfoot, Sasquatches, chupacabras, ghosts, Illuminati members, underground lizard people, whoever or whatever you are, to enjoy the show. Also, remember, this episode is entirely human-made. No AI were used or harmed in the process other than for the base graphic.
And that is the end of our announcements. All right. So our episode today revolves around a small village that is located near the Welsh border that is called Dodleston. Now, this town has been around for a very long time. As a matter of fact, whenever we tried to figure out the exact year that Dodleston was created, the first mention of it that we found was in medieval records that were written shortly after the Norman conquest of 1066.
So needless to say, this town has been around for a long-ass time, more than likely since the 11th and early 12th centuries. Now, in the heart of this town is St. Mary's Church, which has been around since like the 14th century. And surrounding this church are stone cottages that have been homes of thousands of individuals throughout the years. For the most part, Dodleston is a quiet town where not much has happened. However, all that changed in 1984.
A teacher named Ken Webster decided to borrow a BBC microcomputer from his job, so in his spare time at home, he could work on a simple writing project, as well as his friend could use it also. However, what occurred over the next 2 years would go on to puzzle computer experts, paranormal researchers, and skeptics alike for decades.
Mysterious, well-written, eerie messages written in 16th century English by someone claiming to live in the exact same house 400 years earlier began appearing on Ken's computer. A short time later, things became even more bizarre. Another entity began writing to Ken, an entity claiming to be from the year 2109.
What unfolded over the next 2 years wasn't just a haunting. It wasn't just a prank. It was something that ripped at the fabric of time, pulled apart the understanding of reality, and asked one simple question. Why is your timeline more real than mine?
This is the story of the Dodleston Messages, a time-slipped digital seance, a possible psychological experiment, or maybe the best executed hoax that no one has ever managed to explain.
All right. So like we said, our story begins in the year of 1984 with an individual named Ken Webster. Now, Ken was a school teacher. He was pretty much level-headed, practical, and he was a kind of guy who taught economics at the nearby school, like we said, and he didn't believe in ghosts. Ken, along with his 19-year-old girlfriend, Debbie, moved into a 17th century cottage that was located in the village of Dodleston.
Now, the house was pretty rough. It had low ceilings and stone walls. It was something you would expect from a centuries-old British cottage. So needless to say, the house needed some work, so Ken and Debbie, all of them, began work renovations.
Around 6 months after moving into their new home, Ken's friend, Nicola Baguli, who was a girl and a teacher, by the way, contacted him. Nicola, which we're going to call Nick from now on, she stated that she quit her teaching job 6 months prior. She decided to go to East Africa, and for the past 3 months, she had been living in hotels and trains, which had insect and bug infestations. So 3 months before that, she wasn't dealing with bugs and insects. And then for the past 3 months, she was. 6 months total.
Nick also stated that she was broke and felt that time was slipping away from her. Ken and his girlfriend Debbie talked about Nick's situation and agreed to let her live with them in their cottage, rent free, as long as she helped out with renovations. Nick agreed and moved into the home with Ken and Debbie.
Initially, everything was pretty normal. The three of them lived peacefully together and they renovated the home. But all of that quickly changed.
One evening in September of 1984, the three of them decided to paint one wall in the downstairs of the home, while also eating pizza and drinking wine and tea. Gotta have tea. As they were painting, Nick stopped and pointed to some marks on the wall that were located between the bathroom and the kitchen.
Nick said, "Hey, did someone put their feet up on the wall? Because these marks on the wall look exactly like footprints." However, the foot didn't have 5 toes, it had 6 toes. Also, the footprints on the wall, they went up the wall towards the ceiling of the home as if someone was walking and then began walking up the side of the wall up towards the ceiling.
Now, both Ken and Debbie told Nick that those footprints had been there since they had bought the home, and they didn't think much of it. So they continued on with their painting of the walls, and Nick ended up painting over the footprints.
Also, another thing too is Debbie did mention that the footprints were smaller than her foot, and her foot was a size 5. But they also stated that the footprints were bigger than an animal's, so they were in between bigger than an animal's and smaller than a human's. So either like
Gnomes.
a gnomes, dwarfs, imps, little people perhaps with 6 toes.
Then again, they're in the UK, so what's a size 5 UK?
I don't know. Women's size 5 in UK is equivalent to a US woman's size 7. Okay. So that's kind of a big foot.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
a decent size, an average. I'm not a expert on feet. I hate feet, as a matter of fact. I'm not like one of those foot fetish freaks, not to kink shame. But anyways, let's continue on.
I'm shaming.
So they painted over the footprints on the wall. And eventually they finished painting and they all went to bed. Ken and Debbie slept in the front bedroom of the home, which is in the upstairs, and Nick slept in the back bedroom, which is in the upstairs as well. And they painted the walls of the downstairs, and this all plays a role.
That next morning, Ken decided to go downstairs to use the bathroom when he woke up. After using the restroom, he decided to go look at the wall that they had painted the night before.
To his surprise, the footprints had returned. They were not exactly in their former position. They were just slightly over to the right more, but still positioned as if someone was walking up the wall. And whatever walked up the wall also had 6 toes again.
Now, upon seeing that, Ken yelled for Nick and Debbie to come downstairs. All three of them were horrified due to the fact that Nick had painted over them the night before. Nick was so freaked out that she wanted to leave, like the actual cottage, like move out, but Ken actually convinced her to stay.
Eventually, they decided that one of them must have developed a strange form of sleepwalking, and Ken decided to repaint over the footprints, and going forward, they never reappeared again. That is a stretch to say, oh, one of us must have been sleepwalking up the wall, but that's what they decided to, go with.
Hmm.
Yeah. From that point forward, the three of them avoided going downstairs at nighttime.
2 days later, Ken, Debbie, and Nick all went to the nearby town of Chester to stock up on food. They didn't arrive back home until later that day, and they were all too tired to put up some of the groceries. So they decided to leave a pile of about dozen cat food tins on the floor until the next morning when they could put it up.
The next morning at 8 a.m., Ken woke up and was shocked whenever he walked into the kitchen. The cat food tins that were left on the floor the night prior were neatly stacked into a human pyramid formation, which was sitting right next to the refrigerator.
Of course, Ken woke up Debbie and Nick to show them what he had discovered. This freaked the three of them out, and they all chalked it up to be maybe a friend coming over while they were asleep and stacking the cans up and then leaving.
The next morning, nothing out of the ordinary occurred. However, the morning after that, another odd thing appeared. They found another weird construction, a single column, approximately 4 feet high, made of a couple 2-liter bottles of lemonade and a packet of dry cat food and a kitchen roll stood in the middle of their kitchen. So you had a 2-liter lemonade soda bottle stacked on the top of another 2-liter lemonade soda bottle, and then stacked on top of that was a
Dry cat food packet?
dry cat food packet, and then on top of that is, I guess, paper towels.
So, needless to say, someone or something had gathered the food items together and stacked them on top of each other. And then, following this incident, a sense of unease permeated throughout the home. The outside doors were more rigorously checked at night, and all of the windows were shut and locked. Also, creaking of the ceiling or the furniture, which was previously unnoticed, became a matter for concern.
Pretty much everyone started to become like freaked out,
Paranoid.
over, the littlest of things. For example, one night, Nick thought she saw a dense shadow pass her window above the kitchen. Also, Ken and Debbie woke up at the same time because they thought someone was in their room. However, in both of these cases, there was nothing there. Now, at this point, things were about to spiral far beyond creepy footprints and eerie stacking of the groceries. And surprisingly, it all revolves around a computer.
So, in December of 1984, Ken borrowed a BBC microcomputer Model B from the school where he taught. He set it up in the house to do some coursework. It had no internet, no modem, no email, not like these fancy ones we have now. It just had a word processor on a 5.25-inch floppy disk. He had borrowed this computer for Nick, who had left her English teaching job and wanted to create an alternative cabaret band in hopes of gaining just enough performing credits for an equity card.
And an equity card is proof of membership in the Actors Equity Association of either the United States or the United Kingdom.
So pretty much you wanted to become like a playwright.
Yeah.
Anyway, Nick wanted to write scripts and dialogues, so Ken, the good friend that he is, decided to borrow a computer from the school that he had worked at that had the word processor ED Word on it for her to use.
Now, this next paragraph that we're going to read is straight from Ken. It will help us better understand the computer that he provided for Nick. So we're going to go over that real quick. Ken stated, and we quote,
Providing you remember to get a floppy disk to store your work on, a word processor is very simple to use. I explained to Nick that all she needed to do was type in *D, press return, and then *ED word, and another return button, and the word processing system was there, ready to go, with a simple menu of choices before you on the screen.
You can create a document, revise one that you have already started, just look at the document, or look at the index.
I told Nick that every piece of work, every file has to have a name. These names are kept by the computer on an index, so it is easy to find your work or check what other work is held on the disk you are using.
It was designed for elementary school children and is simple and fun. We set it up in the kitchen, as the only table we had was in that room. Nick loved it to bits and slogged away for hours. End quote. Slogged away. It's an interesting term.
Oh, he uses a ton of interesting terms in his book.
Yeah, there's one that is borderline a slur.
They use it regularly over there, but here it would not.
What is it? What is that term? Go ahead.
I cannot.
I give you the pass.
Are you allowed to give me that pass?
I have one extra pass saved up. I'll give it to you. Go ahead, say it.
Oh, it's so bad.
It's the term. It is what they use. You can't be canceled for this. What is the term, Dan?
Niggled.
Ooh.
Niggled. It it
Well,
it means like something that like has like an occurrence of like annoyances over and over, something like that.
I'm not saying it.
They use it very rare regularly over there. And in his book, I read it. I'm just like, what?
Wow. Yeah. Well,
Dan's canceled. Okay, you got me.
all right. So what happens next?
All right. So keep that in the back of your head, not the word, but how you use the computer
Yeah.
as we go forward in the story. So moving forward, one evening, Ken, Debbie, and Nick returned home from going to their friend Dave's house to spend a few hours socializing. When they returned home, they noticed the computer was still on and flashing as they forgot to turn it off.
Upon looking at the computer screen, Ken noticed that it no longer showed the ED word menu. Instead, it had a basic screen message that said BBC B32K Accord DFS. Something or someone must have accidentally backed out of the program before they left the computer.
So Ken decided to hop on the computer and go through the index, and then he got curious and wanted to see Nick's progress for fun, but that's when he noticed something odd. There was another file that was created named KDN that neither of them had made.
Ken opened the file that had somehow appeared on the computer. It was a message, not an error log or scrambled text, but a poem, a full, thoughtful, bizarrely worded message written in archaic English. And this is what it said.
Please forgive me for this because it's written very weird and there was like no actual.
Yeah, that first one, like the capitalization is all over the place, but it's like Ken, Deb,
Deb and Nick.
Nick.
So it's to the three of them living in that house. True are the nightmares of a person that fears. Safe are the bodies of the silent world. Turn, pretty flower, turn towards the sun, for you shall grow and so. But the flower reaches too high and withers in the burning light. Get out your bricks. Pussycat, pussycat went to London to seek fame and fortune. Faith must not be lost, for this shall be your redeemer. End poem.
Yeah, and like I said, the capitalization is all over the place and there's like spacings in between the letters, so pretty weird and odd.
It's very weird.
So, after reading this, Ken was pretty freaked out, and he was specifically freaked out at the first two lines because it was pretty much towards Ken, Deb, and Nick, and it said, "True are the nightmares of a person that fears." And he was wondering who the hell wrote this. Now, Ken ended up saving the poem on the same disk, but unfortunately, since he borrowed the computer and the floppy disk, he had to return them both back to the school. He wanted to print out the poem so he could have it on paper, but he would have to wait till the end of the school day when it was not busy, which I never found out. Did he end up being able to save it, or did he rewrite that out of just his memory?
He saved it on the floppy disk. He had to go back to the school, return it, and he had to put the floppy disk with the other floppy disks. And then
Oh,
he had to wait till the end of the school day because the computer lab area was busy. Then he had to go through there and find the floppy disk that he used, found it, then he was able to print it off.
oh, okay. All right.
So moving forward, around Christmas time of 1984, Nick decided to leave, not permanently. She decided to go spend the holidays with her family. So it would just be Ken and Debbie at the cottage. Now, the day before Nick left, another bizarre thing happened. The three of them went into the kitchen and found a 4-pack of lager, beer, alcohol, rearranged into a standing tower. Also parallel to that was a stack of 4 cat food tins.
The day after this happened, Nick left to go visit her family. She was like, fuck this, I'm out. However, even with Nick gone, Ken and Debbie would still go into the kitchen and find food and drinks stacked oddly. The couple discussed this among themselves and just stated that it was probably someone coming into their home when they were not there or when they were asleep and simply playing a prank on them.
I guess it's good to say, like, they did have friends that came over. I know specifically 2 of them were like bandmates because supposedly, I guess they played music together.
Yeah, they had instruments and recording stuff in one of their back rooms.
Yeah. So I guess they were coming around regularly. So they were probably thinking it was one of them that was probably playing pranks on them or someone that knew them. So a few months later, in February of 1985, Nick returned back to the cottage and wanted to work on her sketches again, scripts, dialogues. So Ken decided to borrow another computer from his work. Ken also wanted to use the word processor because he wanted to write up an agreement with his buddy, John and Stennett, as they attempted to push a few handful of songs towards a few music publishers.
And he wanted to have like a contract
Yeah,
with them for that.
And then you can't forget what I probably would have had it for. Ken and Debbie also wanted to play computer games on it, which I think they had like the basic computer games. Nothing fancy though.
All right. So they had the BBC microcomputer Model B at the cottage, and which was from Ken's school that he worked at. And on one Sunday, it was left on in the kitchen, and no one was messing with it. Like no one was around it messing with it. The three of them, Ken, Debbie, and Nick, decided to go out for a bit. And when they returned, Nick was like,
"Hey, chaps, let's take a look at that computer. I bet John could have been at it again."
so when Nick says John could have been at it again, John was one of the bandmates who regularly came over to the house and went into the back room and used the instruments or the recording devices that they had in the back room. And they assumed that John was the one playing these pranks on them. So after Nick was like, hey, let's look at the computer, Ken and Debbie were like, oh no, but kind of like in a sarcastic way. And they opened up the floppy disk, and the computer, well, not opened up the floppy disk, but opened up the computer floppy disk, however.
The index.
Yeah, the index. And they found that there was a new file that was named Reate, which it was spelled create, but take away the C, Reate. And they decided to open the file up and see, what there was, if there was a new poem or a message. And here's what it said. And we're going to read it in normal English, not the archaic English, since it's hard to understand.
"I write on behalf of many. What strange words you speak, although I must confess that I too have been badly educated. Sometimes it seems changes are somewhat obstructive, for many a time they disturb me sleeping in my bed. You are a worthy man who has a fanciful woman, and you live in my house. I have no wish to alarm you, but for it is only since the half-witted fool tricked, ripped apart my confines, have I been tormented at nights. I have seen many changes, lastly the schoolhouse in your home. It is a fitting place, with lights which the devil makes, and costly things, which only my friend Edmund Gray can afford, or the king himself. It was a great crime to have stolen my house. L.W."
Now, the author of this message, L.W., he seemed kind of confused and somewhat frightened. He claimed that he lived in the same house as Ken and Debbie and that he could also see them, and thought that Ken and Debbie were spirits. This kind of, scared them and confused them a little bit, but that soon went away, and they were just kind of like, well, that's interesting. Ken and Debbie were like that. Oh, well, it's a weird message, but it's interesting.
And I liked how he said, "It is a fitting place with lights which the devil makes." So he could see Ken and Debbie. Then he's just like, I guess the lights when they turn it on, he's like, "That's the devil's work. How are you doing that?"
Yeah. Electricity.
Oh no.
So it's someone, hypothetically, in an alternate timeline or in the past being able to see Ken and Debbie and somehow is sending messages to them on their computer that is not connected to the internet or anything.
Nope. Back then they didn't even have internet.
Well, it was back then, like 1983, 84, but
It's the UK, they're way behind.
yeah, they didn't have it. It wasn't like commercialized.
Yeah, this computer didn't have the internet, didn't have a Wi-Fi or anything like that, so didn't matter. So again, though, Ken decided that he wanted to print out the file, the one that appeared in the Old English from LW, on the paper so he could read it, and he wanted to get another teacher's, Peter Trinder, who had taught Ken English a long time ago.
Wanted to get his opinion on
wanted
the
to, get his opinion on it. Now, when Peter got the letter and he looked at it with Ken, he was pretty intrigued by it and assumed that it was actually like a hoax, but he's like, if it's not, that's pretty badass.
Yeah. So after reading that letter, Peter Trinder, who was another teacher, who was also a linguist, I think, he was invested, and he told Ken that, hey, if any more new letters came into that computer, I wanted first dibs on reading them. Another thing worth mentioning is that so far they've only received letters on the computer and they haven't sent one back yet. So they've only received letters, never sent any back. And their friend John, who was the bandmate, who they believe were pulling the prank, said that they needed to send a message or a letter back to LW. So they agreed to send one, and this is what they sent.
In the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, dear LW, thank you for your message. We are sorry for disturbing you. What would you like us to do? Did you live in a house on this land in about 1620? Do you want us to tell you more about our time? Why write a poem? Who is Edmund Gray? And is he related to Egerton family? Do you have a family? Is the King James or Charles Stuart? What is the charge house? Was this village called Dodleston in your life, and how many families lived here? Thank you very much for your messages. Thank you for not making us afraid. Ken, Debbie, and John.
Which, by the way, when we say they sent a letter, it really wasn't like them writing a letter out or typing one out on a computer and sending it to a location. They just typed it out on the computer and saved it.
Yeah.
Assuming that the individual who was writing them could actually, see it when they saved it. And they wanted to start the letter off with the date. So they went all old school and they assumed that LW was from the 1600s based on his archaic English. And that's why they referenced the year 1620. Now, after this message was sent, aka saved on the computer, they wanted to wait for an immediate response, but decided to not bother and just continue on throughout, the regular day.
So John ended up actually going home, and the rest just relaxed around the house till about that afternoon. Then they decided to check the floppy disk index. They ended up finding a new file, a new letter from LW, and sadly, they didn't save this file. And when they were reading this file, they called John, and he wrote down part of what he was, what he had heard from Ken reading it. So this part's kind of all by ear now, since they didn't save it.
And it's very jumbled. So it's an asterisk and then a question mark, and then it says, "'Twas an honest farm of oak and stone. It is helpful that you should tell me."
You should read it in that whole time.
"Tell me about thy time. Dost thou hath a horse? Edmund Gray, brother of John Gray, lives at Kinnerton Hall. Thy king, of course, is Henry the Eighth, who is 46. I nie woot of King James. Mine charge house is a place of law schlong. LW 28 March NO 1521. Whew. That's what it said, supposedly.
You understand that?
Absolutely not. All I got was that it's from LW and that he wrote it March 28th, 1521.
So the king at the time is King Henry VIII, who is 46. He does not know who the hell King James is, so he doesn't know LeBron. So his place, the charge house, is a place of schooling, and Edmund Gray is the brother of John Gray that lives at Kinnerton Hall.
Okay. I said Shalong.
I said that before too.
Okay.
But yeah, it's spelled all weird. Like schooling is like in parentheses, but it's like a place of lore. Loore. So it's spelling is definitely weird. But yeah, that was fun to read. And that's what LW wrote to them. And it only gets stranger, really. This next letter to LW would reply to, he would refer to himself at the end as Lucas Wayneman, a man from the mid 16th century, a scholar, a devout Christian. But later, he would confess that the name Lucas Wayman was actually an alias.
Yeah. His real name, he said in a message, was Tomas Hardin, an alias he used to avoid persecution from the church. Through the computer, Ken and Tomas began conversating. They would write messages back and forth. Ken would leave a message on the disk. The next day, he'd receive a reply. It was sort of like pen pals, but across timelines.
Yeah, Tomas described the village as it was in the 1500s: fields, sheep, rough cottages. He talked about King Henry VIII, religious upheaval, and local gossip. His English was consistent with early modern dialects, using contractions and spellings that matched what scholars would expect for that era.
Now, Tomas was curious about Ken and Debbie. He believed their electric lights were, and we quote, burning devils. The computer he called a limbs boisty, boisty, a light box, pretty much, and he was terrified that they might be demons.
Even though he believed that they might be demons, he ended up forming a relationship with them. They exchanged letters, a strange trust was built, but it was still fragile, and it was about to be tested. Just when Ken thought he figured things out, a new voice entered the chat.
Messages began appearing that weren't from Tomas. They were from an entity calling itself 2109. Their tone was stark, cold, authoritative. Their message said, and we quote,
There is another person who is monitoring your conversation. We are not a god. We are not alien. We are you.
who or what was 2109? Well, they claimed to be from the future, a time when experiments with time manipulation were possible. They warned Ken and Debbie not to disrupt the, and we quote, experiment. They said Lucas, aka Tomas, was part of this experiment as well.
It sounded like science fiction, but also eerily calculated. 2109 knew things about Ken and about things he was doing, about messages Tomas had sent before Ken had even opened them. They claimed to be part of a group studying communication between three time periods: 1541, 1985, and 2109.
One of the messages that they had sent stated, "We are attempting to bridge time. You are the link. There is no conspiracy, just a truth that you are not ready to understand." 2109.
Eventually, Tomas told Ken he was going to write a book, a record of everything that happened between them and what was going on. He said he would hide this book in a safe place in Meadow Cottage, Ken's home, so that Ken or someone in Ken's time could find it, a way to prove the messages were real.
However, the book was never found. Despite multiple searches and even inquiries to local historians, no physical artifact was ever recovered from the cottage or its grounds.
Then in 1986, the messages stopped. Tomas said he had to leave. The people were suspicious. He feared he'd been accused of sorcery. His final message was cryptic and emotional. And that is also when 2109 had signed off.
So, no more messages from Tomas and no more messages from 2109. 3 years later, in 1989, Ken published a book called The Vertical Plane. This book details his entire encounter with the home, computer, mysterious messages, and everything in between. However, no media outlet or news agency picked it up or talked about it. It didn't go viral at the time. No one really cared.
Nope. And did find out, though, the more you read into the book, Tomas did get caught. And he had his friend replying to Ken and them saying, "Oh, Tomas got caught. They're trying to charge him with like witchcraft and shit." But I think they end up letting him go.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, so some bad shit did happen to Tomas.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, at least they didn't test him to see if he was a witch. Drop him in water.
If you drown, you're innocent. If you
Yeah.
float, you're a witch.
Yeah. But after that, Ken gave no interviews. He refused to do press tours, and the book itself quietly faded and was forgotten until it was rediscovered here recently. And Ken has since vanished from the public eye.
The Dodleston Messages are a mystery with no clear villain, no solid theory, and no satisfying resolution. They exist in that eerie, frustrating space between what we know and what we can't explain.
So was it real, a hoax, a haunting, or something else entirely? Maybe the better question is, what if it could happen again? Because if time is just a layer, and if communication can slip through it, then somewhere someone might already be hearing from you.
Or us. And that is the story of the Dodleston Messages. But just like every week, our episode does not stop here because now we are going to get into the strange facts and findings that we uncovered while researching this topic.
All right. So our first strange fact and finding is about the location of the home. Now, if you look up the location of this home, a lot of people will say that the location doesn't exist and that is proof that the entire story is a hoax. However, after doing some research, Aaron did find the exact location of the Meadow Cottage home.
Which, by the way, Meadow Cottage is the name of the home that Ken was at, and he was sending in the messages and he was sending the messages and all that stuff. So yeah, and I was able to find the home. So the first thing I did was I didn't read almost the entire 400-page book. I read quite a bit of it, but not the entire 400 pages of it. And in the prologue of the book, Ken says the following: Meadow Cottage, it stands between Chapel Stores and the phone box, the third in a row of 4 tiny 18th century dwellings facing onto Kitterton Road. It is accessible at the front from Kinnerton Road and at the rear by Church Road. End quote. Now, I used that information to help find the exact home of Meadow Cottage, and I found it. So, bloop, here's an image right here. For all of you listening, you should go watch this on YouTube. But if you're listening and you don't want to go on YouTube, go to theoriesofthethirdkind.com, click on today's episode, and the image will be right there for you to look at. And it's a Google Earth image of, you see Dodleston Chapel Stores and Post Office, where a pin is dropped at. And that road that's right next to that is Kinnerton Road, and it leads to Church Road right there, because there's that Church of England primary school right there. All right. So I'm like, okay, I found the intersection, I found the chapel stores, and I found the post office. There has to be Meadow Cottage around there somewhere. So I drop my person on there and I start like going down the roads, and I found it. Here's the next image. And where the home is at right there, that's in the red square, that's Meadow Cottage. That's Kinnerton Road right there. It's in front of it. The other road over there is Church Road, which you can access the rear of the home through Church Road. So that is exactly what is said in the book. And if you zoom in, it says Meadow Cottage right there to the left of the door on that gray sign.
It does.
Yep. So I found it. I found the home. So the home does exist.
And it is red brick.
Yeah. And we tried to find like actual like property records or individuals who lived at that location. And then we quickly learned that England has like strict privacy laws, the UK does, and they lock down property records and any public information for like 100 years. So anyone living at that home in like the 1980s won't be available for, public records until 2080.
We'd be too old to care.
I'll be long gone by then. I got a good like 2 years on me. Anyway,
Don't we both?
So that's the first strange fact and finding. We found the actual home. The home does exist.
It does exist.
There you go.
All right. So our next strange fact and finding is called Thomas Hawden. That's right, Hawden.
Yeah, there was a lot of weird ways to pronounce this last name, and we went with Hawden.
We went full British on that one. Now, as we know, one of the entities that communicated with Ken claimed his name was Thomas Hawden. So we began searching the interwebs for that specific person.
Now, we didn't find a Thomas Hawden, but we did find a Dr. Thomas Hawden who lived from 1665 to 1735. He was a Roman Catholic theologian, writer, and Oxford-educated scholar who led Catholic missions in England.
We also found an entry in the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography that confirms he was a controversial Catholic scholar known for debates with Protestants. However, after more research, we learned that Dr. Thomas Hawden lived and worked hundreds of miles from Dodleston and had no ties to that area.
So it is highly unlikely that this individual, this Dr. Thomas Hawden, was the same person as the 16th century figure that was supposedly talking with Ken. Also, fun little knowledge nugget, but the high school that Ken taught at was Hawden High School.
Now, our next strange fact and finding is called New Leads, and it is similar to our previous strange fact. So on the website of Reddit, there's a subreddit that has been investigating this topic. Someone made a very interesting post around 8 months ago titled, Some New Leads. And this post goes on to say, and we quote,
I did some sleuthing tonight and made some progress on this mystery. Firstly, I accessed the old BT telephone books using ancestry.co.uk. I found K.R. Webster's address confirming the location of Meadow Cottage as being at 4 Kinnerton Road in Dodleston, UK. Then I accessed the local parish records going back to the 1500s.
I searched all parishes for the names of Harden, Howarden, and Hawden, all common spellings for the same name back then. Words were often written as they were pronounced. There were no hits for Howarden or Howarden, but quite a few for Harden.
I checked baptisms and burials. Most were too late, but there was a match for a burial. Thomas Harden, buried on October 27th, 1558, in Winbury Parish, and Winbury is not far from Dodleston. I apologize if I pronounced that uh, town wrong.
It's very weird.
Yeah. Now, this could be a relative or descendant. I didn't find any baptism or marriage records that are a good match for Thomas.
I'm going to search for records in Oxford and see if anything turns up. As we know, he planned to go to Oxford. The takeaway here is that there are no records of any kind for Howarden or Howarden in Cheshire parishes in the mid 1500s, but there are many for Harden. I think this is the name to search for when doing historical searches.
And that is what the individual wrote on the subreddit. So he's pretty much saying, like, hey, there's new leads and that these people are actively still investigating this, like, up till 8 months ago. So people are still finding out new stuff. And speaking of new things, let's talk about our next strange fact and finding, which is called the skull experiment. So, as we were deep diving into this topic, we began looking at other hauntings near that area to see if any of them were kind of similar. And boy, did we find something very strange. So, one of the things that stuck out to us was the skull experiments.
Now, the Skull Experiment was a series of paranormal investigations conducted between 1993 and 1998 in the village of Norfolk, England. Led by a group of researchers from the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, the experiments sought to explore phenomena associated with mediumship and the afterlife. The experiments took place in a dimly lit cellar under highly controlled conditions and involved two mediums, Robin and Sandra Foy.
The skull group claimed to produce a wide range of phenomena, including visual manifestations, physical objects appearing out of thin air, anomalous light effects, and audio recordings of supposed spirit voices. One of the most remarkable claims was the creation of film strips containing symbols, images, and written messages originating from spiritual entities. These strips were placed in sealed containers and later found to have been marked with unexplained images or writings, sparking considerable intrigue among believers and skeptics alike.
Now, here's where things get interesting. The reason why the group stopped their sessions was because they began to get interference from a group that said that they were from the future, and this group called themselves 2109.
Now, we do have a diary entry from Robin Foy on May 18th, 1998, and that was one of the mediums involved in this experiment. Now, Robin's diary entry stated Patrick and Emily, who were the spirit guides, came later. They confirmed that there were still problems with the Alice portal. Apparently, it was known by Spirit sometime previously that our doorway was likely to extend to the year 2014, which would not have caused any problems.
What had not been foreseen, however, was that it would, in fact, actually extend as it was then doing as far as the year 2109. This was allowing some access to genetically different beings from our own future. We were then told that allowing access to beings so far into our future contravened natural laws and could therefore not be allowed.
Much attention was being given to this problem by the Council of Communion. At this point, in May of 1998, Emily and Patrick were not even sure whether that this crisis might lead to our work being shut down totally. End quote. So that was the first, or not first, but one of the diary entries from Robin Foy that mentioned the 2109.
So the portal at Skull was reported to have been opened by their spirit team, SPRs, so it doesn't appear to be the same portal as the one in Dodleston, geographically, they are on opposite sides of the country.
Yeah. Now, the next thing that we're going to go over is another diary entry, and this was from their final sitting down on November 6th, and they got the following message. Your experimental work with your spirit team has created a vortex or doorway. It is this vortex that has attracted experimenters from your future. This means that every time your four spirit energies are together and you try to reestablish communication with your team, the future time experimenters try to make their own links with your time.
This interference cannot be allowed to continue. We ask that you cooperate by not attempting to contact your spirit team. We must tell you that all the work at Skull was very important.
The links that were made have already enabled interdimensional energies and wisdom to assist the changes to future Earth consciousness. Therefore, this final mission is to seal the doorway that has been created and to end all communications. I repeat, to end all communications. And that was their final message. So that's very odd. They have seemed to get in contact with some
2109.
beings from 2109 who've been doing these time experiments. And they're like, hey, you're fucking it up. Y'all need to stop. And they're like, okay, we'll stop.
This was taking place on the other side of the country.
Yeah.
So now SPR did actually investigate the Dodleston event, though, but they didn't come up with anything.
No.
The one thing I read is like, oh, we discovered that the entity's name is Thomas. Where it's like, yeah, he says his name.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
Some real good investigative work right there.
But that right there is our last strange fact and finding. And now we are going to get into the theory section and discuss the multiple theories as to what this entire thing could be. So, Dan, you want to start that off for us and tell us about our first theory?
Of course. So the first theory that we have is called the poltergeist. Classic ghost activity, objects moved, footprints appeared. Maybe Tomas was a spirit, maybe 2109, or whatever their name was another one, and they both used the computer as a medium. Paranormal investigators believe the house was haunted, and intelligent hauntings adapt to new technology.
You know, I wish we could get access to the house, but the last time it was sold was in 2002, and I don't know who the current owner is.
Probably someone that bought it and wanted to make a movie of it.
Yeah, true. Some big, like, studio or something.
I'd like to get my hands on a... I'd like to borrow a BBC microcomputer.
Go ahead and say it how you were originally going to say it. You'd like to get your hands on a BBC? Is that what you're going to say? BBC microcomputer.
Model B.
Yeah.
With a floppy disk.
I wonder if any of those are on micro B computer.
I honestly used to love playing on those computers because back in elementary school, that's the computers we had. Or not those exact ones, but they used the 5.25-inch floppy disks. We used to play Oregon Trail and stuff on it. Are they like super expensive?
God damn, dude. $667 for one? No thanks. That's on eBay.
What's the exact price?
$667.
Oh, not 666?
No.
I don't know if I can afford that. Maybe I'll open a GoFundMe for buying that so we can communicate with the past.
Yeah. All right. So that was the first theory, which is called poltergeist. Pretty much states that it was just ghosts. So the next theory we got is called hoax. Now, this is the most grounded explanation in pretty much what everyone believes. I say everyone, but majority of the population believes. And that, Ken or someone he knew faked the messages using knowledge of early modern English. But there's really no known motive behind that. Ken never gained fame or fortune. And he pretty much stuck to his story. He never gave media interviews. He only wrote one book in his entire life, which was the one book about this.
The vertical plane.
Yeah, he pretty much vanished and didn't want anybody to contact him. As a matter of fact, I emailed one of the publishers who did not email us back yet, and it is White Crow Books, who is the current publisher for Ken Webster's book. And I wrote them an email and I stated, "Dear White Crow Books team, I hope this message finds you well. I am writing to inquire about the book The Vertical Plane by Ken Webster, published by your company. I'm particularly interested in learning whether the latest edition includes any autobiography notes or commentary by Mr. Webster. I'd be grateful if you could provide any information about the author himself or whether he has chosen to remain anonymous. If possible, could you confirm blah, 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 blah for research purposes? Thank you in advance for your time and assistance. That's what I sent them. Didn't get anything back. So thank you for that. I was hoping to find out some more information about Ken.
Watch the email like months later. Yeah, we don't have anything.
Yeah. So I think it could be a hoax. I do have a theory that kind of goes with this. It might have been Debbie got jealous of Nick being there because Nick and Ken were very close and they were both teachers. And Debbie was significantly younger than the both of them.
I think Ken was late 20s.
Let's see. He was born in 55 and
This was 1984.
so he was 29, 30, 31 when this happened, and Debbie was 19. So she was 10 years younger than them. And it might have been like Debbie trying to freak Nick out to get her to leave.
It almost worked, but then Ken's just like, no, stay.
Then it became a thing between Debbie and John, the bandmate, because it was stated that John was interested in Debbie, had like a thing for her.
He had a big thing for Debbie, and this got them closer because John and Debbie both bleed more into the paranormal side of this. So they had a lot in common with this going on, and Ken didn't really give a shit.
Yeah. So it could have been that, the hoax.
Could have been.
Or it could have been this next theory.
Which is called time slip. Ken and Tomas were somehow coexisting in the same space, separate only by timeline. The cottage may have been a thin spot like a wormhole. 2109 was monitoring this time bridge, ensuring communication stayed stable.
Possible. That's a good one.
Because, I mean, Tomas did say that he was able to see what Ken and Debbie were doing, and like they were remodeling the house. And that's why he was just like, well, these new changes were kind of cool, but those devil lights, like, how'd you get my house anyways? Like, why are you doing this? Why are you changing my house?
Yeah. So he called it like a light box, like I'm guessing the computer. My thing was, how the hell was he sending messages? Was he talking to the computer or was he using it? And if he was using it, how the fuck did he know how to use it?
Good question.
It's never answered. It's a mystery.
It's like, how did he get a computer, aka a light box, or some type there? And how was he writing into it or typing into it?
If it was in a different timeline.
Yeah, because honestly, I don't think he was talking into it. Because guarantee the way he was talking back then, they probably wouldn't understand a damn thing.
Yeah.
It's been all letters.
All right. So the next theory we got is called the government experiment. This theory states that 2109 wasn't supernatural, that it was a human, possibly an intelligence agency running a psychological experiment. The messages mirror those in MK Ultra and remote viewing programs. They're cryptic, manipulative, and oddly kind of like predicted the future a little bit. So maybe this entire thing was the government experimenting and trying to be like, hey, how would an individual react if they received messages from the future or from the past? And then they just use this as a study. That's a little far reach.
A little far reach.
But then again, the government has done a lot of weird things.
Yeah, I did read up someone was saying that RF, radio frequency, could still affect a computer and actually send messages to it. But these messages weren't just like being received, they were being saved on the floppy disk.
Yeah. So you have to have access, physical access to the computer.
Yeah. Or at least that floppy disk, which it's not like he returned it and then when he went and got it, a new message showed up. It was just sitting in the computer, saved, and then later on they checked and it was there.
Yeah. All right. So what's this next theory we got?
This next theory is called the Topa. I think I said that right. Tomas was created subconsciously by Ken and Debbie, a thought form brought to life through intense belief and focus. This aligns with the Tibetan Topa mythology and modern chaos magic.
So kind of like
Manifestation.
Manifestation and a little bit of mix of like Aleister Crowley's magic with a K. When he went to the what is it, the Boleskine house, which is the house in Loch Ness. He went there and he did his 6-month ritual to summon up something. And he didn't finish it, but during it, he summoned up an entity known as LAM, LAM, which was an alien entity. So maybe Ken and Debbie subconsciously summoned up some type of entity.
Possible.
Or it could be this next theory, which is called the simulation break. This theory states that if reality is a simulation, then the Dodleston messages were a glitch or maybe a debug interaction. Tomas, Ken, and 2109 were all interacting with the same system from different user profiles, pretty much. So it was a glitch in the matrix, a bleed through. Kind of hard to believe, but okay.
So 2109 is the admin, and Tomas and Ken were just basic users,
Yeah,
and somehow they were glitched, and 2109 was there to monitor things, make sure not too much information was traded back and forth.
yeah. No creating iPhones, no butterfly effect.
This next theory, though, is called psychokinetic experiment. This theory states that Ken or Debbie knowingly or unknowingly manifested the messages through psychokinesis or unconscious channeling, using the computer as a medium.
So that's similar to what we mentioned two theories ago.
Yeah.
Maybe it started off with John doing the weird things like messing with them, stacking up the cat food and the food and stuff like that, not telling them. And they became paranoid, and that paranoia manifested these messages somehow. I don't fucking know.
I don't know. Debbie was 19. I don't know how old John was, but going back to the first theory of poltergeist, they did state that since Debbie was still young, she was in the range of her emotions go if her emotions were out of whack, could summon a poltergeist.
Oh,
So manifestation of things could happen because of that.
yeah. So it kind of falls underneath that theory as well.
Yeah.
All right. So our last theory is my favorite one to think about, and it's called AI test. So this theory states if the Dodleston messages are true and were real, it is possible that 2109 was a super AI from the future. It was this AI from the future, this 2109, was either testing remote influence over non networked computers through time and space, or trying to quietly influence something to its benefit. Now, I could see it testing like an AI system going back and say, okay, we need to go back in time and test our influence over non networked computers that are not connected to the network, so that if our network is taken down, we don't die as an AI. We can go to non networked computers that aren't connected to anything and still live there as like a piece or like a like a virus, so that if in the future, let's say if this AI goes crazy and then humans decide to kill it off, this AI then plants itself into like a floppy disk or something. And then humans start using like, I don't know, non-network computers, that one day it uses that specific floppy disk and the AI is able to reproduce itself silently and then kill off the humans. So kind of like saving itself, backing itself up on a floppy drive.
Makes you think it's like some Terminator shit.
Yeah.
Maybe the super AI went back in time, knowing that they had to go to when the first computers are created, so they have no restrictions on what they can do. The new computers have laws. You can't harm humans.
All right. So now we're on to our own personal thoughts and theories. If you had to pick one theory, Dan, that you believe this is, what would it be?
Honestly, I'm gonna have to go with hoax. I think it was Debbie for multiple reasons. Because if you look into it today, Ken doesn't talk about it no more. Peter doesn't talk about it no more. Nobody talks about it anymore except Debbie. She's the one that's still kind of keeping this alive herself, among other people. And I think, for one, she did it probably to, like you said, scare off Nick. She was staying there for free, helping out. But her and Ken were probably too close. Debbie didn't like that. But then also, she found that she was getting attention from somebody else from doing it, John.
John.
And she figured if this went on, it would make Ken jealous. But Ken honestly got intrigued by just responding with it. And pretty much he didn't really care about the whole Debbie and Ken or John thing. But even though Ken knew that John was definitely interested in Debbie. So I think it was Debbie.
Yeah.
Then John probably got involved afterwards.
I agree to an extent, but before that, I do want to state that as weird as this may sound, I do believe that there's this weird connection between timelines, right? Like, we've been here in this area and recorded multiple things. I've gone to specific locations multiple times throughout the years. And I think there's I don't know if you can communicate, but there's like a weird connection between like yourself being there 5 years prior to being there now to your future self being there. It's hard to explain, but I believe that there's like almost a little bit of a communication, but almost like an intuition that your future self gives to you in certain spots of the timeline and in certain areas that you pass yourself in. So I just want to state that. But when it comes to the Dodleston messages, I 100% believe it was a hoax. Fabricated by Debbie as a way to get Nick to leave. John joined in on the hoax. Well, John started the hoax with the stacking of the food and stuff. Debbie found out, and then the computer was brought in for Nick by Ken, which pissed Debbie off even more. So her and John together began writing those messages on the computer to freak out Nick to get her to leave because the initial um, paranormal quote unquote stuff that John did didn't scare Nick enough to get her to leave because she initially was going to.
She was going to.
So I think it was all fabricated by John and Debbie as a way to get Nick to leave and then maybe to get Ken to leave so that John and Debbie could live happily ever after.
Yeah, what was the deal between Nick staying there? So she just had to help renovate?
Yeah. Didn't need to pay rent, just renovate it.
Whose idea was that?
That was Ken's because Nick was broke and she was a previous school teacher and she didn't want to go down that career path anymore and she was depressed. And Ken was like, well, you can come stay with me and Debbie, but you don't have to pay rent. Just help us renovate.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, it was Ken. Because Ken and his girlfriend talked about it. So more than likely Ken was just like, hey, my friend, she's, you know, not in a good spot. Can she come stay? And all that. Everything will be okay. She doesn't have to pay. She just has to help renovate.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I'm going with. But I would love to believe that it's something else, but it's possibly not.
I would love to believe that it was actually like a communication between timelines.
Yeah.
That would be pretty interesting. You get to learn about the past while, I mean, not giving away too much information of the future, but describing things so people are just like, oh, that's what we have to look forward to.
Yeah.
Wars.
Well, if you or a loved one have communicated with the past or you've communicated with the future, we would love to hear from you.
Or if you have a BBC microcomputer Model B, I want it.
Yeah, send it to our P.O. Box, which is located at theoriesofthethirdkind.com. Click on the contact tab, scroll down, and our P.O. Box address is right there. You can also send us handwritten letters, and I will shove them up Dan's ass. So, with that being said, I want to thank you for joining us and thank you for listening to today's episode. It means a lot to all of us. But that is the end of the Dodleston Messages episode. We want to thank you and we want to tell you that we love you and we are proud of you.
Much love.
So, with that being said, would you like to roll us out?
It's okay to be out of this world with your thoughts.
Because you are not alone.